2 boxes, loads of connectivity, and gobs of power. It's everything that I want and way more than I need. My name's Taps, this is 0102 Studio, and this is a review of the RC1572MKII stereo preamplifier and the RA1582MKII power amplifier. Those are really long names. It happened. I fell madly in love with review gear that I got in, and I almost bought it. I previously did a review of the Rotel RC1572MKII, and I put it out there, my long-standing lusting for this amplifier. And I mean, it was even the wallpaper, I'm pointing right there, to my MacBook Pro, up until it got replaced by the Kia Stinger. Rotel sent it over, paired up with that beautiful preamplifier that's stacked on top of it, so I can review it. I don't personally own separates, not because they're not good. They're just generally cost prohibitive and not as easy to justify versus an integrated amplifier, which is one box, generally costs quite a bit less, and does just about the same thing. Still, I mean, separates do offer some advantages. The ability to switch out components at a whim, switching out preamplifiers and power amplifiers. Separate boxes also help mitigate some overheating issues or electrical issues. Also, to be honest, it's 200 watts, and you don't really see 200 watts in a lot of affordable integrated amplifiers these days. And, you know, 200 watts is 200 watts, and it opens the doors to lots of speaker options. So those are really good hi-fi reasons. Once I took delivery of these Rotel components, I quickly shot an unboxing video, which I won't make you suffer through now, but you could check it on my channel, linked up there somewhere. I set the Rotel pair up in 2 separate areas. One upstairs in my living room, paired with my Cambridge Audio CXN V2 streamer, and then in this area where they are right now, paired up with my turntable setup and a few other fun pieces like a CD player and whatnot. Speakers that I use for this review, I use my Monitor Audio RX2s. I have just sold those to a buddy. My Q Acoustics 3030Is and the Bowers & Wilkins 685 S1. Those are getting a little old. I love them to death, but they're getting a little old, and after having the Macintosh components in for review and then now these in for review, I feel like I need to step up my speaker game and go for something a bit more high-end to see if I notice a difference in clarity, in soundstage and depth and all those fun things that we talk about. Because I feel like I missed out on a little bit of that with the speakers that I had on hand. It felt like my speakers were starting to tap out a little bit. But the Monitor Audios were probably the best pairing, or the most solid pairing for these, but even those are fairly bit old. They're about a decade old now. Subwoofers that I used were the Bowers & Wilkins 610 and the Q Acoustics QB12. This combo is pretty big and chunky. When I saw the 1582MKII power amplifier online, yeah, I totally lusted after it. I thought it was sexy as hell. I thought it was super clean. I loved it in silver and black. And I wanted to get my hands on it. Having it in person, the chunkiness really does stand out. It actually caught me off guard a little bit. And I sort of had the same feeling with the A14MKII that I had in for review. I mean, it has a modern-ish look to it, but there's a little tinge of like old man hi-fi in the design, where like on the outer edges, on the corners of these, it's like really shiny chrome and it's rounded. Even like the faceplate, like I didn't expect. I mean, it's really solidly built, but it's fairly thick, and yeah, it's not as clean and minimal as I thought it was seeing it in photos. It still looks nice, but I think personally, I mean, I think the power amplifier holds up better than the preamplifier. The buttons are a bit more rounded on the preamplifier, and it's not as gorgeous as like the amplifier. Also, there's the blue lights. I don't have it turned on or plugged in right now, but the lights on the power amplifier and the preamplifier are bright blue, and it's not like a, I don't know, it's not like a beautiful blue. It's like a weird digital sort of blue. It's really bright. On the preamplifier, you can dim the blue light. On the power amplifier, you cannot. Rotel does know this, and they've supplied little stickers where you can dampen essentially the light. I didn't unpack those and stick them on because they're review pieces, but I 100% would have stuck them on because they're pretty bright. I mean, even if it was like the small little light that they had on the Fluence AI61s that I had, and even you can turn those ones off, would be amazing. Yeah, I hate the lights. The power button, when switched on, has a nice, meaty, chunky click to it. It's really satisfying when you turn it on. I think the shiny metal corners are kind of what throw me off on the design of this thing. If they just left the front fascia and corners all in the same brushed aluminum, I think it would look a heck of a lot more sexy. The preamplifier follows suit design-wise. I mean, it's essentially the same, it's just shorter. Rather than have you watch me stumble through the incredible list of specifications on this pairing, here they are now. Somehow you need more connectivity, then you probably have too much stuff. The LED on the preamplifier is a white on black LED, really similar to the one that was on the A14MKII, and I have a similar gripe with it, where it's just really old school looking and not sort of befitting of the price point of this. It's a text-based screen, and it takes a little bit of menu diving to kind of get everything set up, but once it's all set up, it's kind of a set it and forget it system. One of the things that I set up is tone controls. I love having me some tone controls, and actually right here on the remote, you can actually adjust the bass and treble on the fly, which is really, really nice. Not having tone controls is a bit of a deal breaker for me. As an aside, the remote is about as full featured as a remote can get. It's pretty basic and not super hot or sexy. It's pretty lightweight too. But yeah, you can control everything you want off the remote, so you never have to like get fingerprints onto your beautiful shiny components if you don't want to. The break-in period just took a couple of days. I didn't really keep track of my total hours. I was just kind of lost in the music and really enjoying what I was getting. Then I hit a bit of a snag. Playing music via Bluetooth or USB, the audio would play for about 5 seconds and then it would just stop. Seriously? It didn't matter what I did, how I connected, it just wouldn't play anymore. And so I reached out to Rotel to see what was going on. Rotel said that there was a crucial firmware update that needs to be installed. And if I went onto the website and downloaded so long that I had a PC computer, that I could make that installation, and Bob's your uncle. I don't have a PC computer. I'm a Mac guy. And for some reason, it's not possible to do with a Mac. I don't know if that's for sure true, but that's what I was told. Needless to say, the update made a big improvement. USB is now 2.0. Everything plays without problem. If you're going to pick these units up, just make sure the update's made either prior to you buying it or at the dealer who sends it to you. Or if you're a keener, do it yourself. Just make sure it's updated. It makes a world of difference in your enjoyment of the units. I took the delivery of the Rotel pair just before the holidays and enjoyed them for an extended period. Longer than I imagine most reviewers get to hold on to components. But this being a pandemic and this being Ontario, I don't know how much of a rush they were in to get them back in. At low volume listening, I noticed that things like vocals are really clear, but the volume of the bass was a little bit recessed. And then just cranking on the volume to about 65 dB is where the bass really came alive and the whole presentation opened up and really got going. So I feel like moderate listening levels are best with this pairing. I started this review out in my living room, and that was paired with the Cambridge Audio CXN V2 streamer. I did it in two separate ways. The first was connecting the streamer directly to the preamp here, and the second was connecting the streamer directly to the power amp using the streamer in preamp mode. The CXN upsamples everything to 24-bit, 384 kilohertz, and features two Wolfson DACs for that digital to analog conversion. It also features RCA and XLR outputs, so naturally I went ahead and connected the XLRs so I can give those a shot. Thanks, Amazon. I used a playlist that I tend to go back to every so often. It's from an artist that I really enjoy, Blocks and Escher, and they have on Spotify an influences playlist where I guess it's just music that has influenced them to make whatever music they had made over the last few years. It features a lot of music that has a bit more ambience or a bit more of a cinematic quality. It's not so much driving drum and bass as what their music is. It's more, just musical and airy and a bit more somber and a bit darker in tone. Of the tracks, there's one that really stands out because it's from a group that I really love, The Meters, Stormy, and it has a bit of everything that I like. It's got that funk, that vibe. It's got some ambience to it, nice driving bass. If you are following along, give Stormy a try and just pump it on your system. It's great. It's really relaxing. It's got that rainy day funk sort of vibe to it. Really like it. I switched between the Monitor Audio RX2s and the B&W 685s for this playlist session. I actually ran it through a couple of times just so I can get a real sense of like what the differences are and what the audio characteristics were. I tended to prefer the overall sound of the 685s, but when it came to handling bass weight, again, minus a subwoofer, the RX2s kind of came out on top and was a bit more clear and had a bit more weight to it. I do wish the Preamplifier featured some sort of bass management. It's so full featured, it has subwoofer outputs. It would be nice if there was some sort of cutoff, anything from like 60 to 120, just so, you can save the drivers on bookshelf speakers like I was using. There was a point where I really had to back off on the volume just because I didn't want to blow out the drivers on my speakers. Don't know if it would have. But yeah, it would be nice if there was some sort of bass management. Of the speakers, the RX2 fared best with the amount of bass coming at them. And that's due to the larger driver, the 8-inch driver that they have. Surprise, surprise, my favorite pairing with the Rotel is the B&W 685 S1s. I think it's just because I'm really used to the way they sound. If you're at all curious, here are the tone control settings that I used for my associated speakers. The difference between having the CXN connected to the preamp versus having the CXN connected to the power amp is subtle at best. If I was to say, I think the CXN connected to the preamp sounded better, but I have to admit that I'm not overly confident in my assessment of that. I think the sound was a bit more weighty when it was connected to the preamp, but I could be convinced that I'm splitting hairs a little bit and looking for a difference. I didn't really notice too much of a difference, and maybe the speakers weren't as refined as to make that difference as noticeable. But yeah, maybe it may be better with the preamp, but I don't know, maybe. Moving downstairs into the studio is where I got to try out some more combos. I connected a CD player, and then I actually got to try switching out the preamp for the NAD, and actually also switching in the DAC 200M as a preamp as well, because it has that functionality. The NAD did work better in my findings as a preamp. It just has way more connections, so I can connect more things like turntables and everything like that. The DAC is a digital only product, so it's while you can use it in preamp mode if you have an all digital system, but if you have any analog sources, not the best solution. Plus, there's no remote for it, and the volume control's a little sketch a little bit. So I make a bunch of my own music. More recently, I've been making a lot of hip hop at 85 BPM and a lot of chilled out drum and bass. And one of the benefits of doing like reviewing audio gear and having a bunch of audio gear in the house is I get to test out my mix downs on a wide variety of equipment. And it's having these guys in house made for me making more music regularly, just so I could test it out on some really good equipment. Every system in my house gets tested, and then I even use my Kia Rio outside with a horrible stereo system in it. Listening to a newly polished mix via the Rotel combo is a treat that I can't quite quantify. It's pretty fun and really special. Doing my final mix down through the Rotel system was really interesting too. What I normally do when I finish a song is I bounce the audio and put a version on my phone, a thumb drive, and my MacBook. Listening off my phone is kind of the first thing that I do via Bluetooth, but I made sure to listen to the final mix via my laptop, via a USB dongle because, well, Mac. Hearing any flaws in the music that I made in final mix, I couldn't really do that with the Rotel combo. There's plenty of oomph, but everything sounds good coming out of the Rotel combo. No matter what I tried, defeating the tone controls, turning up the treble a little bit, trying different sources, everything that I ran through this combo sounded really good. This is not a combo that's going to pull apart your music and lay bare the intricacies of the mix. It's just not that type of amplifier. So it's not great for criticizing my mix downs, but for day-to-day listening, it's aces. So with that in mind, I decided to switch out the preamp for my NAD 326 BEE. It's a market, I guess, drop in price point, as when I bought the NAD, it was about $3.99 Canadian on sale. I've seen it listed for about $700 up to last year. Inflation, you know, but still, it's a fair bit cheaper than the Rotel preamp. And I wanted to hear if I could hear any of the flaws in the mix more with the NAD connected, and yes, I definitely did. It was a lot less smoother. I kind of knew that going in. It's a lot brasher, darker, and a bit tinnier in overall sound than the Rotel is. And I definitely heard some of the flaws in my mix. It just didn't sound as good as when it was connected to the Rotel. And I noticed that the bass was elevated a little bit, and like the highs were a bit ringing, and I didn't enjoy my mix as much via the NAD. And so I went back, listened in my car, and I was like, yeah, it is a little harsh and a little bit boomy. So I was able to turn those things down in the mix. But yeah, it was surprising. It was like quite a bit different in sounds, just switching out that one component. And I guess that maybe speaks to the flexibility of having separates like this, where, hey, I can listen one way, and then I can just take a cheap integrated with pre-outs, connect it, and have a completely different sound. Then I also tried the DAC 200M connected to the power amp, and it was a lot cleaner than the NAD was. A little less weighty, I think. I am, again, splitting hairs a little bit. It's really neutral, like I mentioned in the review that I did for it. Neutral, 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 neutral. And yeah, it sort of rings true. But the neutrality of the DAC did let me hear some of the flaws more than I did with the Rotel, and then maybe not as much as I heard with the NAD, though. The NAD definitely sounded the brasher of the three. the DAC Magic definitely felt a bit more less smooth overall. Like it was just like here's the recording, here's what it sounds like, and I think of the three, I would most likely use the DAC Magic to sort of like really test out a mix connected to the power amp, because that would maybe be the most transparent of them, to help me like find out what the mix is missing. Also, with both of the NAD and the DAC Magic, less so with the DAC Magic, but there was definitely some noise during empty passages of music. It's almost like the noise floor was up a little bit. I tested the connections a couple of times. You have to be listening for it, and you have to have the ability to compare to hear that noise difference. It's not like a deal breaker if you were to connect the NAD to the power amp, but it is there, so it's worth mentioning. All right, I'm gonna jump in right here because I'm watching the edit right now, and I forgot a few things, mainly a conclusion, and some points are getting a bit belabored and it's getting a bit long. So, vinyl. I don't listen to vinyl for any hi-fi reasons, really. I grew up in DJ culture, and that's what I enjoy. I have two Technics 1200s with a Pioneer DJM 450 mixer. The needles I'm using right now are garbage because my good needles got damaged in the move to this space, and I need to buy new ones. So I'm using like a Stanton Trackmaster and a Shure M44-7. They're not great. The reason that I bring that up is the Rotel phono stage is really warm. It's more articulate, more detailed. It's just better overall than running through a fairly inexpensive mixer, if that helps. Vinyl that I used, I have thousands of pieces of vinyl, but one in particular that stood out was Paradox's remix of Bloxen Escher's Broken. It's an amazing tune. Tight drums, amazing programming, tight production. It's awesome. I turned this up really, really loud, to the point where like I was a little bit scared for the drivers on my speakers, and to the point where my wife ran downstairs like, "Hey man, this is way too loud. You're shaking the house." It's an amazing tune, and the Rotel showcased that perfectly. Moving over to CDs, I haven't bought a CD in like a decade or so, so I pulled out an old favorite, Cinematic Orchestra's Ma Fleur album. It's a bit of a contrast to something like drum and bass, where it's a little more musical. It's not really focused on massive transients. It's just really big, lush sounding music. Very acoustic. And with that, I noticed that I could just turn up the volume as much as I wanted to, seemingly without any sort of distortion noticeable to my somewhat damaged ears. If you're worried about distortion or anything like that, I think if you have a pair of speakers that you really enjoy, you want to push them a bit further, the Rotel combo will not disappoint. I love it. It's a wonderful pairing. Aesthetics aside, like while I didn't gravitate towards the overall build and shelf appeal of the combo, I really love the sound coming out of them. And I did belabor a bit with saying how smooth it is, but that wasn't really a detriment of the music enjoyment aspect. It was just really smooth sounding. I would be more than happy with something like that in my studio. In fact, that I almost bought them, or I almost bought the amplifier itself, but I held off pulling the trigger because I'm paying for a fair amount of renovations to our home now, and buying a fairly expensive amplifier just didn't really make sense that way. But maybe I'll buy it in the future.